How is again? I hope you're all keeping well. Uh, it's I think it's today's Thursday, some arse time in July or during the COVID age. Yeah, so it's been interesting stuff has gone down the last few days since I made the last podcast. There's been some funny old things happened. First of all, I think Dave Cullen on Computing Forever nailed it when he kind of made a semi response to my video about Islam being the default religion, but he was talking, saying perhaps it's a used under the kind of like umbrella of cultural Marxism, it's going to be a secular Islam. And the more I thought about it, yeah, I think he's right. I think that's what they're aiming for. Islam would still give too much access to the concept of supernaturalism for the cultural Marxists to be able to deal with. There's a belief in something beyond reality of a god force of things that they despise, like miracles and supernaturalism intervention within human life, is something that they could not allow to be have people believe in. So they have a kind of it's a weird thing. It's like a secular supernaturalism. It's just interesting when you think about it. It's almost like this is the silver bullet they've always wanted. Um, a thing would be like, yes, they want people to worship science, right, as a kind of a god, scientism, but the right kind of science. So, for instance, they've now berated and attacked hydroxyquin, which is a well proven drug with a long track record of helping people with numerous issues. And suddenly it's no good. It's no good because Trump uses it. That's the end of it. And so that's science. They've rejected science, right? Because of a US president who's against cultural Marxism doesn't like it. So therefore it doesn't work. So you have these people who claim to be scientifically minded who are going, hydroxyquin is a dangerous drug. Oh, really? It's been in circulation for years. You had no problem with it until Trump had a problem with it. That's religion. That's a kind of a religion. That's a religious reaction, a dogmatic orthodoxy, the religious reaction. And so, but the same people are obsessed with the face mask. And when you think about the face mask, one of the things about I've been reading a lot about the Middle Ages. And the Middle Ages is a fascinating period to read about, uh, because we're seeing so many of the things that took place then happening now. A lot of people of a lot of people have a misunderstanding that the Dark Ages was a terrible time. Now, the Dark Ages was an excellent time. There was tremendous advantages in science and all kinds of things, and there was a lot less war in the Dark Ages. And it was a time of things like seafaring and other forms of technology really took off. The Middle Ages, it all collapsed. It went backwards. The Dark Ages was like a slight mini return of the classical period. And when the Dark Ages gave way to the Middle Ages, which was total and complete control by the popes, really began with Sylvester I in the Vatican in 1000 AD. The the decline of magic happened then. Now, this is when I say magic, I mean the sense that when I say I'm a magician or I'm into magic or I believe in magic or I know that sorcery is real, what I'm saying is I have a belief that there is a greater purpose to the to the mechanization and to the workings of the universe than just cold hard mechanics. Now, this dovetails nicely into things like quantum physics and particle theory and so on, and even things like advanced levels of psychology. Now, such as Jungian psychology. So therefore, I'm not saying I don't believe you go abracadabra 1 2 3 and something happens. But that's not really what magic is. What magic is the use of language and the use of psychology and particularly the nervous system in order to generate changes in the localized field around you. So therefore, there's lots of things that are magic that people don't think about. Like, for instance, before soldiers go into a battle, they may be fired up with patriotic songs. Well, that changes their nervous system and gives them a sense of, it takes away their fear. It takes away their fear. Conversely, a black magic is when a controlling structure, as Crowley put it, any magic that's not concerned with the development of the self is black magic. What he means by that is that if someone puts a fear into you, and it's say it it damages you physically, psychologically, in other ways. You've been hexed in a black magic kind of way. So, for instance, uh, people at home terrified to leave the house because they think they're going to get COVID-19 have been hexed by the likes of RTE and the BBC and CNN and the Associated Press and Reuters and so on. So they're at home and they're depressed. Well, we know for a fact that depression and isolation and loneliness leads to degradation of the immune system. Well, there you go. So their immune system is then compromised by being depressed at home. Add alcohol into the mix, and you have someone who's been literally subject to black magic. It's that simple. When I, this is why I wrote the book Sorcery. This is why people like me and Grant Morrison and Alan Moore talk about magic in this way, because it's not spooky hocus pocus. It's a scientific use of language and speech and art in order to change human. The localized environment of a human being and also itself themselves, and this so you have a situation where people are hexed into believing they have to wear a mask. So they've been hexed by the media, and this is a classic example of black magic. Now, please, I know some of you think it's bullshit, or you're religious, or you're atheist, but just bear with me. I'm talking in technical terms now. When you have a media that says hydroxyquinone is a dangerous drug that doesn't work all of a sudden, but you must wear a face mask, okay? What they have done then is literally hexed you into believing that a way of thinking of a ritual will save you. So therefore, and this all grew up in the Middle Ages, that they took the science and magic are the same thing. The only difference is that magic is we understand there's more to the universe than what conventional science has to offer. And a religious person may say, well, that's God, whereas like me, say a pagan, chaos paganism, would say, well, or a chaos magician thing, mindset would say, well, it's undiscovered and unknown elements of the universe we haven't actually figured out yet. However, a way to convey them is things like allegory and metaphor, and even art is a way to, and even work with them. And that's what that is. But it's the same thing. Like any magician worth their salt, or any person involved in magic, if they said tomorrow, like if they discovered that something in magic, like I'll give you I'll get to an example in a second, it's been scientifically proven. We say that's it. It's scientifically proven. See, we're not against science. We just know that we operate and function outside the limitations of science in a world of magic, right? That's as simple as that. And we use art and stories and allegory, and I find paganism very, very useful for that. So in the Middle Ages, what you had was a decline of magic and an enforcement of orthodoxy. And as a result, people's lives rapidly deteriorated. The standard of living collapsed, life expectancies collapsed, and so on, until people were living in absolute cesspits of cities that were so bad compared to the Roman and Greek cities and the cities built by the pagan classical world, that they were so bad they were like from another planet. So eventually the Renaissance happened when you had people like the Medici family, and I see a lot of kind of similarities between Trump and Quasimodo de' Medici. And what they did was they looked around Rome and Florence, and they saw these classical viaducts that the Romans had built 1500 years that brought fresh water into a city and took sewage out, the supply routes and roads that brought produce into cities, and realized that the ancient ones had better engineering and architecture. And so they funded what became the Renaissance to discover how they had Brunelleschi who discovered that the dome on top, it was the one who completed the dome on top of the church and cathedral in Florence, realized that what it was the classical pagan Romans had used the egg shape from top to bottom. And they're similar to how the Parthenon was constructed in concrete as well, 1500 years earlier. They realized that the ancients were far better at all this stuff, and it kick-started the Renaissance. Okay, but during the Middle Ages, you had things like crusades. Now, the crusades were just a way that the elite could cull the population. You're an earl or a lord in southern France. and you decide, well, infidels have taken over the Middle East, the Holy Land, and you get set them all up and you send them off there to get killed or die of disease, and therefore you don't have to feed them. And this kind of thing. It was a kind of the Crusades were a kind of biological weapon in some ways. Now remember, the Crusades didn't only attack Muslims; they attacked the Cathars first in the Albigensian Crusade, and that was a horrific genocide. And the Cathars were just a different type of Christian now, but they were still Christian. And then there was also the Swedish Crusades, where they had to go at they finished off with the pagans in Karelia and Prussia. Now this was a way of just, and then the Renaissance came. The Renaissance came and changed everything, and suddenly the intellectual development of the world took a huge leap forward because it had rediscovered the past. Okay, and the use of, you see, you'll have people talk about Plato and Socrates and Archimedes as if they're honorary Christians. They were pagans, just like just like Hypatia was a pagan, and these people were so advanced in science is because they were not trapped into a dogmatic view. Now we have a period now where you have like Christian people very dogmatic, atheist people very dogmatic, where you have people in the middle who are people like us who are like, well, hold on a second, there's a bit of truth to everything, and working with it all is probably the best way to find a solution to deal with anything. But you will find that the the hyper elevation of ritual was a huge thing, religious ritual during the Middle Ages. These endless marches across France to see a cathedral. You know, for instance, like the cathedral that would have a stained glass window of the the resurrection of Jesus, and you would have peasants from Germany saving up all their lives to make a pilgrimage to a cathedral in southern France to see this stained glass. A lot of that kind of thing, you know, a lot of pilgrimages. And now you have that very strong in Islam as well with the Hajj and stuff like that. And the idea is that if you get that done in your life, you've completed your life. You know, and you see even the smaller things today like the Camino. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with sort of like taking a mystical journey if you're doing it for that reasons. Now, the thing is that the Middle Ages collapsed because the lie couldn't sustain itself anymore. The people were living in festering filth in rotten cities and towns that had no sewage or sanitation. And then someone suddenly figured out, well, the ancient classical world were able to do this. And they were able to build things and do things. And it was rediscovered, the Renaissance of the classical pagan world is how that came back. We're getting it again now. I'm seeing it more and more. You can see like things like Trump and the way he's, signed off that all new federal buildings must be built with neoclassical architecture and so on. But the thing was that the other day there was a group of doctors came forward, right? And they said that hydroxychloroquine works. And I was like, this seems a bit too staged to me. It's almost like designed like it's ready to fall. I'm not going to put my hopes in this one. And sure enough, they found that one of the women doctors said that demons could be passed through sex. Now, okay, that was a very easy thing to pick on. Now, that woman is African, and she deals with people I'm not saying African people are backward, but they may have a different culture that's not like Europeans or Westerners, where the concept of allegory, and this is central to magic, is used to convey difficult things. Like, for instance, like in European pagan mythology, they didn't understand that clouds built up enormous amount of electricity and then lightning came from it. But they create stories like Thor and Loki. Thor is the thunder god, Loki is the lightning, and Thor chases Loki. And these are allegories, and they're often the best way to convey information to ordinary people. I don't, I use allegory and metaphor all the time when I'm talking to you in your videos, and I don't think any of you are stupid. I just think it's easier for me to convey them in that form. And, because, and people say, well, what about the scientific backing? Let the science take care of that. Let them, that's their job. My job is to convey the overall thing. And I think that woman back in that video, when she was saying that about demons traveling through sperm, well, believe it or not, that's scientifically quantifiable. Because let's talk about, it's the demons in an allegorical sense, right? It's been shown scientifically that women and gay men store in their brains all the DNA of their past sexual partners. Okay? Good and bad. The DNA is retained because DNA can pass through the blood brain barrier. I'm not 100% up on the science here. I've read those articles a few years ago, and this is what they basically said. So, this is a woman who'll have multiple, or a gay man. I'm not being discriminatory against women or men. It's just that straight men don't absorb sexual fluids, except the other type of talk about in a minute, from women. And those fluids end up retained in the body of the gay man or of the straight or the woman, and they retain in the brain. Now, if they have vast numbers of sexual partners, there is a theory, it could be bullshit, that the through epigenetics, this is the changing of the gene sequence without any kind of causal effect imposing upon it. It happens automatically. That this epigenetics changes the neurology of the person, and they literally become schizophrenic because of all the DNA of their past sexual partners, if they've been promiscuous, are now sort of rebuilding their neurology as a schizophrenic mess. And this may be where all these borderline women are coming from. Now, I'm not saying that's true, I'm just saying it. And a lot of borderline women tend to be highly promiscuous and also highly and completely dissociative once they reach like their 30s. And could be an accumulation of all this DNA from the male partners in their skulls. Now, at the same time, and gay men too, I'm not picking, I'm saying you receive the stuff, okay? Straight men don't receive any sexual fluids directly through, like, insemination and so on. Now, so in an allegorical sense, she was telling the truth. It's been scientifically proven. So, but then they use it, they say that like, today I have sex demons and hydroxychloroquine is the cure to it. Well, you see, this is how the left always work. The left always take something and put it into black and white things. So, for instance, a person who may have used the N word 20 years ago, even if it was in the context of not attacking black people, there's no difference between them in the minds of a lefty and an SS guard who pulled the Zyklon B switch at Auschwitz. It's the same. You use the N word 25 years ago and you may have loads of black friends and love black people and love black music, but there's no difference between that person and the one who pulled the switch and go, ha ha, subhumans, and killed them all in the gas chambers. It's the same. That's how the lefty minds, it works in extremes. It's very, very Old Testament, New Abrahamic. Dave Cullen even said that it's just like Marxism is Christianity without God. Well, the state is God. The leader, Pol Pot or whatever, is God. And so the lefty mind always works in extremes. It cannot demarcate in areas of grey, and so therefore every person who uses hydroxychloroquine does it to stop sperm demons from getting into their heads. And that's how the lefty mind works. It always works like that. It's extremes. Now, it can't be a case of it works for some people who might have neurological problems, the medication, and so on. So, in an allegorical sense, that one was true. Define what a demon is. We use the term demons to say our psychological behavior. I'm trying to fight the demons inside me. That was very commonly used before. Nowadays, it's more the shadow. I'm doing my shadow work. But you say, I'm fighting the demons inside me. Or you've got to work on your shadow, work on your demons. It's the truth. It's the truth, okay? In an allegorical sense. If you couple it with someone who has a history of promiscuous sexual behavior and their neurology is a bag of their sexual partner's DNA over the decades, well, they're literally dealing with demons inside themselves. And if you look at the term, the meaning demon, it's daemon, right? It means the genius. It means the unspoken entity from the Greek, the unspoken other part of yourself behind yourself, like your subconscious mind. Now this is all perfectly okay with me. Oh, and even if those other doctors are if those doctors were sincere and legit, it's only the lefty mind throws the baby out constantly with the bathwater. And you notice atheists do that as well because they tend to have the same kind of that's the irony about extreme atheists. They're just like Abrahamic, Old Testament types. It's really amazing, and so therefore, now then there's another type, like you've heard me do videos in the past on blood magic. that a woman can hex her menstrual blood. It's done very commonly in Africa, synchronicity there. And the man ingests the menstrual blood, the wine of Venus, as it's known. He'll become obsessed with the female. Now, that has not been scientifically studied about the ingestion of menstrual blood into a man, but if it's the same process, her DNA is in that menstrual blood, and it goes into, passes through his blood-brain barrier, then we have a similar process. And why these fellas who have been hexed with the wine of Venus, and I've seen it firsthand myself, don't say it's not true, uh, have can they can't stop thinking about this woman all the time. And this is like this when you often see an unattractive woman, you can always tell, as someone who does voodoo or juju or something like that, or this sort of like Afro Caribbean Latino magic, Santeria. This is very big in those cultures, very very big, and that's how you'll see like a very unattractive Hispanic or woman. I'm not putting Hispanic women. I love Hispanic women, by the way. But like, say she's not particularly attractive, or an African woman who may not be particularly attractive has this stunningly good-looking or handsome husband who's obsessed with her. She's probably, in some cases, I'm not saying all, her personality could be enough in many. She may be a wonderful person, but in some cases, where especially if she has no personality, or you look at her and say she has no redeeming factors, and she's done that to him. You'll also tell too when it's been done because he deteriorates. He starts looking awful. He's obsessed with her. He thinks that she's with, she can't get rid of him. She gets fed up and he's bored of him. He's so clingy, I'm get rid of him. And so he starts to rapidly deteriorate. She puts as much distance as she can between her and him. She's got him, so she doesn't need his love anymore. And so he rapidly deteriorates to the point where he just goes insane, falls apart in every fucking way. And I mean that's magic, yeah. That's a kind of a demon being transferred. And can you scientifically quantify it? Well, not yet, but I'm saying this is magic. We talk in terms of allegory until the scientific thing comes out. And even when the scientific this stuff comes out, I know how fire works, I know how combustion works, I know how a Saturn V rocket gets into space. I love science, I love engineering, I love, technology, but at the same time too, it's still, I find talking in terms of metaphor and allegory is a much more wonderful way of going about it. It doesn't mean that I don't believe, here's an example. You ever see the movie The Right Stuff? That's a very, very good film, but a very spiritual film. It's about the Apollo missions, the early days of Apollo and the rockets and everything. And it has strong spiritual overtones to it, very strong spiritual overtones to it, because there was more to the space race, especially on the American side, than just cold hard engineering. I would ask anyone to watch those high-speed films of the Saturn V boosters on the launch pad, ignition and taking off with all the ice falling down and these incredible thrusts of basic primal alchemical forces pushing that rocket up into the sky, and tell me you're not called Apollo. Even they use the allegory into the sky, and tell me you don't find it moving. I was watching the other night there. I was watching lots of Apollo footage of the rockets taking off and stuff, and it my God, it's filled with immense amounts of magic and spiritual feelings. And I think that's one of the reasons you have this belief that they never went to the moon. I think a lot of those types who say that are hardcore Christians, and or something like that, or maybe they just don't understand engineering. I know it seems infeasible, but if you look at what they say, the reason why they didn't go to the moon, they falls apart very quickly, and. They didn't just fly up in one rocket and land on the moon. There was a decade of work for that, and there was before Apollo 11. There was Apollo 1 to 10, who had to test all the processes, all getting there. But you just follow that stuff. That was something mythic about that. something mythic about it. And you saw my video on the shamanic consequences of space travel, and this has happened at the same time as Arthur C. Clarke's and Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, and this whole thing. Like, I'm fascinated by the whole spirituality of space travel, fascinated by it, because there's not so much deep space travel, but for humans, but the actual idea of a human being uh, leaving this planet, it's almost like a secondary birth. And you watch those videos. If you're bored today and you're locked in your house because of the Rona, go on YouTube and look at the original TV broadcast of the Apollo 11 takeoff. And the sense of tension you feel building up, and then those like high speed films of the rockets actually launching, and you go, there's something incredible happening here, and that's and there. But at the same time too, I worship the nature gods. I believe in paganism. I believe in magic, and it all works for me. And I'm a very happy person. Most of the time I'm an extremely blissful person. Well, I say blissful, but I'm a very contented person in my life because I do not demarcate myself into one specific thing. Same things with religion. I have lots of friends who are Christians. I know some friends who are Muslims. Wonderful. We get on great. Once they don't shove it down my throat, everyone's happy, and I make a point of not disrespecting them or hurting them or anything like that, and saying you're a feckin' idiot for having those rosary beads, or it's only if they start judging or imposing the darkness of their thing on them, that's wrong. That's black magic again. So it's like that's so. When this whole thing of what's happened in the recent days since I've been offline, I said that they would probably find a fall guy within those doctors. It happened. They discredited it. But instead of being upset about it, I'm not upset about it, and instead of them being dogmatic about it, saying, I don't care, I still support what those doctors said, how I've just approached it in terms of allegory, it relaxes you. It makes you feel, life is more savor to it. You understand? It's just like in that film, The Witch, when Black Phillip says, do you want to live deliciously? Yes, I want to live deliciously. And how you live deliciously is when you step outside the world of dogma. And that doesn't mean, you can be a Christian, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Hindu, and you cannot be dogmatic about it. When I was in Sri Lanka, every like as much I went to those temples, those Hindu temples, and I found myself deeply moved because that's what I realized. If we still had paganism in the West, that it would be very much like Hinduism. But what struck me most of all is if you go to a mosque, it's all mosque. If you go to a Catholic church, it's all Catholic. But if you go to a Hindu temple, outside the temple are little shrines to Buddha. There are little shrines to Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary. So if a Hindu is visiting with a Christian friend, Hindus will also incorporate the Virgin Mary into their workings. They don't see any problem with that. You see all over the Hindu world, you see pictures of Jesus Christ. They're not Christians. They're still Hindus, but the polytheistic mindset, it's holistic. So it's less dogmatic in that sense, and it incorporates gods. I mean, like you see my film on Hinduism. I'll put the link below. The Hinduism was still developing complex new gods in the late 1970s. That's why the whole Lovecraftian thing and the mythos of that being so integral to an American resurgent paganism is such a big deal with me. Because the lefties want you in a black and white world, binary, on, off. The Abrahamics want you in a black and white world. I'm talking about the hardcore Abrahamics, the Old Testament, like King James Bible type Christians, the hardcore ones, and the on, off, 1, 0. But you're not a digital computer, and the New Agers say that as well. We're not digital computers. We are analog beauties, okay? And what do analog waves do? They flow. They have cycles. They meander. They have bandwidths. They interact. They swirl. They live deliciously. Take care. Love you all.